Millions of despairing men, women, and little children, victims of a system that makes men torture and imprison innocent people.
You cannot shake hands with a clenched fist.
Produced by a nuclear exchange would be carried by wind and water and soil and seed to the far corners of
the kingdom of God, the kingdom of heaven.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
We're not saying that planet Earth is coming to an end. We're saying that planet Earth is about to be refurbished, spaded under, and have another chance to serve as a garden for another civilization.
Most of the people in here are just your reflections. They're your mistakes.
1776 will commence again if you try to take our firearms.
1 million of the planet's 8 million species are threatened.
You are what you repeatedly do. Therefore, excellence ought to be a habit, not an act.
Your lives and the credibility of the United Nations is at stake.
Epstein didn't kill himself.
The reason this is such an interesting time is not only because we're on the threshold of the end of this civilization.
They're trying to take you out with bullshit.
The experience of the past 2 years has proven beyond doubt that no nation can appease the Nazis.
To those who can hear me, I say, do not despair. The misery that is now upon us is but the passing of greed, the bitterness of men who fear the way of human progress. The hate of men will pass, and dictators die, and the power they took from the people will return to the people. And so long as men die, liberty will never perish.
In the language of the U.S. Department of Defense, these are unidentified aerial phenomena.
Roswell's a very interesting place with a lot of people that would like to know what's going on.
There is very compelling evidence that we may not be alone.
This is the Garden of Doom.
Welcome into the Garden of Doom, and this week we're going to go back into the world of tech and paranormal, and our guest today is Tom Cahue. Did I say that correctly?
Yeah, very good. Yeah, thank you.
It's not at all how it's spelled. It's one of those old Gaelic kind of sounding names, but I've already been told it's like sort of French, Spanish, Basque, Pyrenees kind of thing. So what do I know? I embarrassed myself for a much longer period of time while guessing how to pronounce it and guessing the ethnicity pre-production. So there you go, audience. Full disclosure. Anyway, Tom, thank you very much for joining us here in the garden.
Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure, and I'm very excited to speak with you and your audience.
Excellent. So I guess we should start with you telling a little bit about yourself, where you're from, where you went to school, what your profession is, etc.
Okay, great. Well, yeah. As you mentioned, Tom Cah-way is my name, not any way like it sounds. So speaking of that, I was always Cahue growing up through school and all of that. You know how they love to get names wrong.
Sure.
But so Tom Cah-way, the short abridged version, I guess, of where I came from is I've all been around the Philadelphia area, PA, Delaware, Maryland, that little tri-state area, the little corner down there. That's where, my hometown is, born and raised. And for work, I'm an IT director at the Mary Campbell Center, which is a very rewarding job. It's a long-term skilled care facility for those with mental and physical disabilities. So we are a long-term care facility that residents live in, parents, family members come visit, but we take primary 24/7 care of them. And I am the IT director there. So not only do I have to keep the network up, make sure all of our electronic health records are stable and that sort of thing, but I also work directly with residents on their communication devices, which that's the most fulfilling and rewarding part of this is because residents have basically tablets with different buttons on the screen, and it allows them to communicate where an individual may have never verbally said a word before, but through motor functions, they can tap buttons on the screen and ask me, for example, just happened today, can you pair my headphones with my Bluetooth headphones with my tablet? And a computer voice comes through, they can talk, they can communicate, and very rewarding, very fulfilling. that I do there in terms of the technology.
So usually in an office, the last thing you want your IT guy to be doing is anything except being there, because you're basically a living, breathing meat puppet of insurance. But if you're moving around, it means that something's not going right. And usually it's someone got a stapler or whatever in the printer. But in your job, it sounds like it's different, that you're actually serving an actual valuable function for the residents there and their families, and their caregivers, so that they can actually actively communicate more easily. So that's terrific. That sounds great. But that is not why Tom is on the show. That's not why he's on Garden of Doom. He might be on Garden Views for that, maybe. But he's on Garden of Doom. We want to talk about this. We want to let you know this is a normal guy with a technical job and he's technically astute, but he's also a paranormal investigator in all realms of the paranormal, with some focus in UFOs, a member of MUFON. And I wasn't aware that you were that close. I'm in the Baltimore area. So, we're sort of neighbors. I mean, I don't know exactly where you are, but if it's in those four corners, you can't be too terribly far. Yeah. So that's pretty cool. I'm going to guess York.
No. The Mary Campbell Center's in Wilmington, Delaware. Okay. So, I am up on that corner. I don't know if you've heard of Westchester, Pennsylvania.
Sure, of course.
Yep, that's Westchester right here.
I'm from New York originally, so we make sure to say it Westchester as opposed to Westchester, because Westchester is a county in the lower upstate New York, and you know that there's only, it's like Park Avenue. There's only one Westchester, but there can be Westchesters. So and of course there is also a Chester, Pennsylvania, outside of Philadelphia as well. So yeah, I know my blue line and all my stuff there.
Yeah, that's definitely credit there. Chester, state prison, airport, all that kind of good stuff.
Yep, that's who doesn't love a state prison and an airport? So
especially in paranormal, yes. Give us all of the penitentiaries.
Right, and penitentiaries are haunted places. A lot of trauma in there, a lot of trauma memories.
Oh yeah.
All right.
Yeah, they put a nice word and call it history. Oh. So.
Well, you can do that. I like to think of it as historical trauma. Geographical trauma. I think causes a lot of ghost activity. I have a little theory on that, and I don't think it's a unique theory of mine. But no one's here to listen to my theory, or if they are, they'll get a little of it anyway, because listeners know that. But how did you get yourself into the paranormal? Is it something that was always with you as a kid? Did you pick it up through tech, or what was the path?
Very good question. So I find myself asking other people that because, there's not many of us that like to talk outside in the real world, let's call it, about this sort of thing. So with me, I have been lucky enough where the family that, I was born into and everything, it was more spoken about than maybe other households. So that area was, explored by mother, father, you name the show that was in a paranormal genre, it was on. Way back, dating myself to early 90s, X-Files, things like that. They were all, on TV. In a good Hispanic and Catholic family, that just comes with the territory, right? So when, any question I had experts in the house when I would, are ghosts real, or, things like that, so it started at a very early age. Now, I can't sit here and I won't lie to you, I haven't had that one story basically to kick off everything. I haven't had that this happened and I've been hooked ever since. It's just been something that has been taken as a fact for me growing up. So I never really looked into, do I believe in it or not? It's just something I've always talked about. I've had my own, experiences and things of that nature, but it was never like a big moment where I was like, I didn't believe, now I believe. It wasn't. It was always come across. So I think where I'm at now, moving forward, it's always been an interest of mine. I mean, you name it, the paranormal, ghosts, investigations, UFOs, UAPs, I guess now what they call it, but And then even into the cryptid realm, when we talk about Bigfoots, which is more surface level, I want to get in with skinwalkers and lore and that sort of thing, Native American lore and all of that. That fascinates me to no end. But all of it, I joked with you before, I'm an equal opportunity. I'll listen to anything, don't have to believe it, but I will give people their piece of, let's say your piece of something that happened to you, because honestly, they believe it. If somebody's telling you a story, I found, overwhelmingly that these people believe what they have said, and I've always found that part of it fascinating, because that's also on a relationship level you have with another man or a woman, a common bond that you have over a topic. So when you can bond with anyone over a hobby, that communication and walls sort of come down. So that's what has kept my interest. So obviously as a kid, it's very fun. It's cool. It's new. People don't believe it and you talk about it and more than adults. And that's what kicks things off, right? Oh, I can teach an adult about a UFO that was happening, and then the relationships of talking and being around a community that's so open-armed, that I've found has kept my interest and really allowed myself to grow my own knowledge by kicking ideas back with like-minded individuals about, what do you think of this? And then when you start to get off the surface level of are aliens real and move into, could they be from other planets or are they interdimensional? Are they under the sea? And having genuine discussions about that. So I know I said a mouthful, but it's been with me my whole life. And I guess to start it off it was more accepted maybe in my home than possibly others.
Well, if they're under the sea, they're only aliens if they haven't been living there longer than us. I mean, they're just residents we haven't found yet, which is, by the way, one of my big plot issues with Black Panther 2 with their fake Atlantis, Tulakan, or whatever it is. Why wouldn't half of them been snapped by Thanos too? I mean, he didn't need to know they existed. Just half of everything got erased. I mean, it applied to Asgardians. Why wouldn't it apply to, faux Atlanteans as well? So anyway, that rant is neither here nor there, but, everyone knows I'm a bit of a
every topic is important.
That's right. Everything is important. That's right. Marvel, do better. And I hope that you will. So, all right. So obviously you took this from being just an interest into something where you actually have a group. You got involved with MUFON. I mean, you have to join an organization. So, what made you decide to take those steps, and what were those steps?
Okay, excellent. So moving, past, it's an interest and things like that, and my hobby and all of that. I would say recently, because I haven't been a member for terribly long, but as of the last 3-4 years, I guess getting to a point in age, you start having more time for yourself rather than, doing things, you just had more time. There was more holes in the schedule than what it was before, going out every weekend, things like that. You know what I mean? That sort of slows down when you get into your at any point, but for me, it has, over the last few years, mid-30s and things like that. And I, really would like to fill those holes that became in my schedule with things that I genuinely like that I didn't have the time to research and do before. And so I've always had my theories. I've always had my interest in this, but taking the time to communicate, learning about MUFON, becoming a member, which anybody can become a member at least. You can sign up, pay the monthly fee, subscription-based model. So, you pay less, you get less, you pay more, you get more. That's basic of it right there. But where that comes in handy for me is, groups that I've joined in paranormal investigators of my paranormal society that I've joined. You can take that. The best value I can say for MUFON, let me say this, the best value you can get from MUFON is access to their database of records and search every single thing down to which state and how recent it was of when something, the clarification or the classifications that they have are ridiculously detailed. They are very good. And me being an IT guy, it's not going to be the prettiest thing you saw, but it's a database. And if you know half about IT, you can go search what has happened yesterday and see all the reports of just yesterday, what happened, where else can you do that? I understand they started up the AARO in the government, but they're not. If anything is media enough, they're not going to have that on any kind of website for anybody under any model that you want to think of to be able to go ahead and look at it. This is, I've seen things on there where you're right. It's a light in the sky. It's probably Venus. It's probably a star. It's probably a plane, but they put everything on there. And I love that I can be the judge. You know what I'm saying? And bring a discussion. Because in groups, UFOs over PA group, we can throw an image up and be like, who believes this? Whether it's an image or, a video, because they do put videos up there as well. But just like you were saying before, 90% of them are going to be a light in the sky, and who can really tell? You know what I mean? When you have nothing to base it off of, it's literally black sky, blue sky, and then an object in there. So that that's the value that I see in MUFON that has been tremendous for anybody who wants to join. Yeah, they're going to trying to get you subscribed to maybe newsletters, magazines. They still do a magazine. And they have symposiums and things that you would get discounts for. But if you want just the data, like me as an IT guy, that's the value that you have there. So for MUFON, you just sign up, make an account, go ahead and pay. The steps to do a paranormal society vary, but first I want to preface it by saying find one that you are comfortable with. Because believe it or not, there are very, very many. There's a whole bunch of diverse groups. Some that will investigate anything. Some that only want to investigate dark energy. Some that will stay 100% away from dark energy by using, an empath and which is mine. My group is our leader, is an empath, and he has shut investigations down if he has felt it's too dark in there. I don't want to do it.
Well, we have to find out what's dark energy.
Oh, okay. So dark energy, and I'm not an empath, so I can just explain what he's explained to me, is dark energy is anything that would be more demonic or hate-filled that is more likely to attach to somebody. Our paranormal society, we have members of all ages, from 25 to 60. So we don't want anything to attach. This is not a TV show we're doing. These are people that we go investigate for free. We don't charge anything. We do it for the love, the tech, the writing a report, and mimicking what we see on TV on certain shows, doing it in our real life. We have about 6 to 8 investigations a year. So we're not terribly booked, but, we are pretty regular with it throughout the year. But no, a dark energy is something definitely that was more likely to attach. It's either demonic or negative. Light energy would be just a feeling, from what I explained, a feeling of light. Not light as in terms of like you turn on the light switch, but it's not heavy. You walk in, you can breathe easier. You feel something there. It's more happy. It wants to communicate with you because you're new. So think of a child spirit, a younger spirit, or believe it or not, more pubs have these type of spirits because when people went there, generally you're in a good mood drinking, you're happy, you're cutting it up with your friends. But no, in terms of, we do investigate cemeteries. However, if anything feels negative, we will not go and do that. People have reached out to us and say, something's in my house. They find ourselves on the website, they send an email, I have this story. And when you read it, you don't really get the full concept of it, because just what it does won't tell you if it's negative or the darker or light energy. But when you get in there and light doesn't shine as far, voice doesn't travel as far, air might be a little bit thicker, a little more humid without humidity. That's the sort of things that we have seen that indicates more of a dark energy. That's what I can see. That's more scientific. I don't have that necessary gift that he might have, but that's what I notice in layman's terms, what I can describe. If you shine a flashlight down a hallway, typically it's going to illuminate a lot of things, but in dark energy places, the air is more dense. It's more of a focused beam than sprawling.
Right.
I mean, it's unique. It's definitely unique.
So the light dies more quickly or disperses, diffuses, wherein if it's light energy, it either goes further or goes at least the normal distance that you would expect.
I would say normal, like what you're used to seeing.
Okay, I understand. Well, based on what we were talking about, dark energy might have had something to do with physics, like dark matter, or plasma up in space or whatever that you just don't, something like that. But okay, so it's but it is the something that seems malevolent, foreboding, the kind of thing where you feel like the tingling on the back of your neck. That's when we're avoiding it. But if it's just excitement, and it feels lighter and it feels friendly, then you'll investigate. Of course, me being the cynic that I am, not the skeptic part, the cynic part of me would be like, if I'm feeling light, like maybe that's a trap.
You're very right. You're very right. Have you heard of that theory and that, well, I don't want to say fact because I don't want to get misconstrued, with that, but demonic energies will often take forms of pets, animals, or children in exactly what you were talking about, a trap model, where you're more likely to approach those things. If it comes out showing horns, grilling teeth, snarling, sneezing, boogers everywhere, who's going to go up to that? I mean,
right. I mean, how many myths are about something that's beautiful on one side, but not beautiful on the other, or it's beautiful, when you first see it, but by the time you're in its clutches, it's, turned into a demon, a succubus or incubus, or, a old hag, or, the vampire glamour. You think you're with Antonio Banderas, but it turns out that you're with, I don't know who. Name someone you're with Joe Biden. I don't know. This is just someone old. Nothing that's against him. It's just the first old guy that popped into my head.
A lot of witchcraft lore is built off that, where souls of the youngers, things like that, where you would be repulsed if you saw what their real image was.
Right, and you always hear the tales where someone says, "Come here, come." Back in
the ancient Greek and Roman mythologies.
Oh, and then the Grimm brothers too. All of it. But and everything new harkens back to something old, and when it's a trope, then the trap thing is something that I would think that your group would have to be. Now, maybe the leader, because he's an empath, maybe he can feel right through that. Maybe he can feel what the true intentions are, and that's sort of a safety net for the group. I don't know. I don't know how that works. I don't know how strong an empath you have to be. I don't know if that's measurable or if it's just experience, and if you get experience like everyone else by making the wrong call. But so what events that your group investigated stand out to you that rang paranormal true after investigation?
Okay, so I'll tell you something that would be a moment, just like you said, for most people, where I don't believe in this, but I'll go along anyway, to boom, I believe in it 100% now. So Laurel Hill Cemetery in Philadelphia, big sprawling cemetery, many acres overlooking the river, Kelly Drive, a beautiful area of Philadelphia, right? Our paranormal group goes around, and when we do investigations with just our group, we'll stick together and we'll go all the way around. However, a lot of times we're contracted. We don't take anything, but the cemetery, charges people. We take groups around and we split up because it's huge, In one of those groups that had, let's call them civilians, right, or regular people who were walking around, we're giving tours. We're talking about certain grave sites that might have an interesting story. This person was on the Titanic, things like that. As we're roughly in the same geographical area. We have a lot of war history from Revolutionary and things like that as well. Mm-hmm. So we were walking around this a certain group of, Revolutionary War people that were buried. One of them was the youngest, I believe, was either in the Revolutionary War or in all of wars on American soil. That was the youngest that was killed in battle. Unfortunately, you had all hands on deck, basically. So you had 13, 14, 15-year-old, things like that. Mm-hmm. Maybe not shooting, but definitely playing some kind of part in the war. Walking around this specific area, big monuments. I mean, it's the land of the 12-foot high, cement fixtures, statues, things like that. We're walking, and we tell everybody, we have the same thing we tell everybody, if you see something, say something. Don't just, I don't know what it is. You're here to look for paranormal. If you see it, shout it, and we'll look for it. Tell everybody, please just let everyone know. You don't know what somebody else has seen, and we have seen on our end people that an event could happen, and 10 people didn't see it, but 5 people did. It might not make itself known to you. So we're walking up. We walking across the pass. We're talking. There's a lead investigator, and then somebody else. The lead talks, and the other one kind of corrals the crowd, make sure everyone's moving. And we're walking, and out of the corner of our eyes, there's something was taking a couple steps towards us and walk away. There's no visitors at this time there. This is at night. It's closed to the general public. And we had a flashlight on and turned and looked. It was just a pair of legs, no top, that took 2 steps and started walking away. And we could follow it, and it took about 6 steps. I'm watching half a human take 6 steps away from me. And I stopped in my conversation. The gentleman was like, "You saw that, didn't you?" Before I even said anything, he said, "You saw that, didn't you?" I said, "What did you see?" Because that's what we're trained to do. I don't say what I see. I ask you what you see, if we see the same thing. Because we need to confirm without speaking to each other what was saw.
Right.
Or what we saw. He said, "I saw a pair of legs take a couple steps and shoot off the other direction." That's exactly what I saw. I turned around to the group that was walking. I said, "Did anybody see something just now?" 2 people said, "There was just a pair of legs walking down that way." How did you guys do that? They asked us how we did it. Like we didn't do anything. This is a legit thing here. We didn't do anything. What you saw is what you saw. And other people were talking, walking, in a group and things like that. They had not seen it. But from that day, if you saw what I saw, what those 2 people saw, or a fellow investigator, in our little group there, if you saw where just 2 legs take a couple steps towards you, turn around on a dime and not sprint, but walk quickly away from you. And it's not just out of the corner of your eye. It catches you, you turn, you throw your flashlight on it, and you see it. That itself right there, I believe, would make anybody from a skeptic to a believer. And you can hear my story, and it's never going to hit the same. I'll be very honest. It's not going to hit the same to you, me telling you this, your audience hearing this. But put yourself in that mindset that you are out with other people, without other people, whatever you want to do, and you see that walking towards you, then turning around and walking away from you. And it might only last 3 to 6 seconds, things like that. But that's enough to see that I saw what I needed to see to believe that something is more than this. And I'm not going to sit here and bang a drum and say, "You have to believe me. You have to believe me. I saw it," or "You don't believe in anything." No, I'm realistic. You have your own opinions, and come to that realization for yourself. Don't believe me to believe there's a ghost out there. Do your own research, see something, and then have it believed to you, and then have your own belief about it. But that would be my example for you there.
That is a great example. I have a question for you on, what kind of defenses do you employ? I mean, do you arm yourself, and what would you arm yourself with? I mean, I imagine that there's some people who, carry crosses or something of some religious significance for them. But, I mean, is there something else that your group has? Or, I mean, I don't want to sound silly, but we are in paranormal. So charms, crystals, symbols. I mean, if we're investigating the paranormal, you would think that the solutions to the paranormal, if there's something to the paranormal, there's something to the solutions to the paranormal as well. So do you all come armed with anything? And I don't mean like ectoplasmic blasters like Ghostbusters, but maybe I do. If you have them, that's cool too.
Yeah, no, they get pretty expensive when you rent them, so we only take them into the most haunted places, Right. But anyway, digress. Little joke there. So yes, we do. Before we do every investigation, we stand in a circle, hold hands, and our leader says a little, I guess the best way to say is like a non-denominational prayer, because we are a group of individuals. We're not going to make anybody adhere to any specific thing. We just say a generic non-denominational, please don't let anything attach to us, keep us strong, keep us, focused, and help us collect some good evidence. Just something generic like that. Due to the fact that we don't go into the more negative places, we haven't had any experience where somebody brought something home with them. Now, we know what to do if that happens, which you would burn sage in your house, maybe sprinkle holy water in your entrances. If you're religious, you would put up, a cross of Jesus or things like that. Those are things to help after the fact.
Right.
But beforehand, to be, proactive instead of reactive, you just keep yourself mentally bright. Don't let yourself get down. Allow yourself to leave the situation if you start to feel run down. Because going through this and hearing experiences from people that have had attachments leave a place and follow them, it comes when you are hungry, angry, lonely, tired. It comes when you're not in the correct mindset. It comes when you haven't prepared fully yourself. When the spirits would like to wear you down, because you have to use energy, or they have to use energy. And we hear all the time about batteries running dead, electrical equipment failing, things like that. But we are a ball of energy. That's what we are. That's what our mass is.
Right.
So you'd be naive to think it wouldn't, try to take some of yours. And when your defenses are down spiritually in that realm, that's when it's more likely to get in to you. When you are run down and tired, exhausted, things like that, you're more likely to let something in because you're not, fending it off. You're trying to push through. If you need to take a break, you go take a break. You get out of that situation. A lot of these come in hyper-focusing moments, such as when you're trying to do an EVP session, because essentially you're inviting something in there. You want it to get on your recorder. You want it to play a soundbite. You want it to come through. When it tries to come through, it might be using you to amplify itself through your device. So you are essentially lowering your guard by definition right there to try to have that come through. We don't use any, I don't believe, I shouldn't say that, I don't know for a fact, we have a couple new members, but I personally don't bring any charm or item that gives me good luck or things like that. I do, now this is probably just me, but when I get back, for me mentally, I take a hot shower, even though it's not, it wouldn't be germ related. It just helps me refresh that way. I haven't had anything come back with me. I haven't seen any weird anomalies at my house that, would mimic something that was happening, on an investigation. So I do believe what we're doing works by choosing where we're going to go, sticking to the later ones, and also, giving a quick prayer beforehand about, not having anything attached to us, and we want to come home with the same soul that we went there with.
So it's more spiritual than any sort of I'll just say weapons cache, whether defensive or otherwise.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. I don't want to paint with a broad brush here and say you have to be spiritual to do this, but a little bit is that element of you have to believe in spirits. You have to believe in things outside of this natural world.
Well, yeah. When you're looking for ghosts and paranormal, you're looking for, spirits. That's a synonym for them. So, so you have to be spiritual of a sort. You don't have to be Catholic spiritual or Orthodox Jewish spiritual or, et cetera, et cetera. You just have to believe in something bigger than, ourselves and, and use whatever. I'll just use this because I don't know about the phrase charm of protection, or methodology of protection that you believe works for you. And, time will tell if it does.
Absolutely. We're dealing with an unknown science here. Who's to say that, something has attached and it's trying the long con? It won't do anything right now. It'll wait for you to get older. There is no way to go home, grab a meter, and see if I have anything paranormal about myself. And that comes in a little bit with the tech and the tools of the trade too. Me personally, I'll tell you, I believe this 100%. We don't have the tools to accurately measure spirits, anomalies, things of that nature. And I think we're trying to use the wrong tools. A tool that'll give us a little bit of the answer, but I don't think that device has been invented or created yet to give us more definite answers.
Okay, so what kind of technology does your group employ?
Okay, so they're fairly inexpensive, so we have the full gambit of what's out there in the field currently. So you have K2 meters, Mel meters, which reflect EMF auras basically and let you know shifts and changes there. You have REM pods, you have full spectrum cameras that can see things outside of our vision, because believe it or not, what you see is not everything that's out there. It's just what our eyes can pick up. So with those two things, are primarily we have DVR or EVR, electronic voice recorders that we play. And the method for that, I'm going to get into that, is very unique how we do it compared to others, because typically you have one person in a setting and you wanted them to be alone. We have everybody and we start at the same time. And that way we can limit anything that was outside of us that might have made an imprint on that voice recording that we know is on everybody's, then we know it was something outside. What is fascinating about this is the paranormal ones we get, even though we're in the same room, even though we're in a circle, even though we all hit record at the same time, maybe only one or two of us will get that voice and not the others. And I think that's phenomenal. That's something that proves more to the anomaly point that's paranormal just by definition, because if you have everybody with the same recorder in one area, how are only two getting it and not everybody else? So that's definitely how those EVRs definitely come in handy, and they are the most baseline tech. If anyone's thinking of being a paranormal investigator, you can buy them online for under $10. It's the most limited tech you can get, or most cost-effective. I won't say limited, most cost-effective tech you can get. We have tours and investigations. The K2 meter, which looks like a handheld white piece of plastic with about 5 lights on it, green, and then it goes to red, yellow's in the middle, and then you have green, yellow on one side, yellow, red on the other side. That one is the most popular by far because it's handheld, it's like this, and it has 4 buttons, and you can see if there's ghosts, and they love to hold on to it. They ask questions. They'll tell any kind of spirit, hey, move this to red if you were female, and it won't. Move this to red if you're male. It'll move it, and then you can play basically your form of 21 questions with the spirit. So that's definitely the most popular tech, I'll say, that goes out there. Not cumbersome, not heavy, handheld. KISS, right? Keep it simple, stupid.
What about seeing using different spectrum of light, X-ray, different? There's a lot of talk now about resonance and frequencies, and so is there? Obviously you talk about electronic voice recorder, but for $10, I don't know how many different frequencies and I'm not exactly sure if frequency and resonance is measured the same way. I don't know enough about that. But do you employ anything to try to measure those? I mean, can you see gamma rays, X-rays, infrared? Just like maybe even like hunter night vision goggles or scopes. Yeah.
Yes, I mean, we wouldn't be doing ourselves a service. We would essentially be wasting our time if we didn't have at least one piece of tech that's used across the board and on the field. So the night vision is there. The FLIR, so thermal imaging, that one is very popular as well. It's handheld almost like a gun. You can point it and have a cold spot where there shouldn't be one at all, do your own debunking, be like, hey, I have a ton of EMF meters right here, or there's a hot spot on the wall and you're in the basement and there's a ton of wires there. Yeah, of course. You know what I mean? So you can debunk with those tools yourself, which that's a part of the investigation. And quite honestly, a little bit of the fun is, what could this be? And that's very interesting and a key point too. But in terms of frequencies, I think of what you were hinting at. Have you heard of a spirit box?
I haven't. No.
Okay, so a spirit box in really layman's terms, and I can't get all into the technical thing because it's rather new, but it scans low frequency radio waves. So not gamma, it's radio wave. And the thought is that on the lower frequency, we're giving a power source or an energy source to a spirit to communicate. And people use it. It's not just a set device. People have headphones that go on, and essentially all they hear is radio sec, that kind of thing, scanning different frequencies. And when it gets to something, a word will pop through that they hear in the static. And the thought is, this is a dead radio box. There's nothing it can pick up. It's just radio waves. It's just static. But a word will come through. And the thought process behind that is it's giving enough ample energy for a word of a spirit to say a word to come through a spirit box. You have another one, and I'm blanking on the.
Let's stay there for a second because we are in that we're sort of assuming that the spirit is going to speak English or a version of English that we'd understand. I mean, I'm told that if you went to merry old England 1,000 years ago and someone spoke English to say me, that I probably wouldn't understand much, if anything, of what they said, and they wouldn't understand what I said. Let alone if you find somebody, I mean, I don't know why they'd be in Southeast Pennsylvania or Western Delaware, but if you found someone who spoke, Akkadian or Phoenician an unknown language that predates that is completely unknown to us because it's prehistory. It could be that you are. Is there any device that can hear sounds that we cannot understand or translate, but because of the way the sounds are articulated, that a computer can at least say that's language, that's communication, or they're speaking in what the equivalent of computer code or musical notes or geometry, it has a structure of a language, and you feed it into AI, and how AI is translating what chickens say and what ancient Akkadian tablets say. I mean, who knows? No one can fact check it yet, but let's assume it's right. Is there any sort of processes for that, or is that sort of in the future?
I think what you actually described right there is in the future, but there's something similar. There's a box that it's not a spirit box, it's a little more advanced than that, but it works along the same lines as scanning all of EMF fields and combining EMF and radio and other different frequencies, all frequencies in this theoretic room that, if you're in a room with a theoretic room, and allowing through that spirits to enter words. It has a predefined vocabulary inside the box. There's nothing I can do on the outside to manipulate it. No keyboard, no nothing like that. It has its predefined words and uses and brings in the input via the frequencies in the room, radio frequency, EMF meters, and it doesn't do any kind of coding per se, like what you were talking about, where it just allows the spirit to come in, and since it can draw it in via those different methods, it'll allow it to access its vocabulary bank and spit out a word or words or sentences. And I've seen that work, do full sentences or just simple yes and no's when you prompt it. AI would be a great resource if we knew what we could do with it in terms of interpreting the uninterpretable. I think that is the next step in this whole evolution of investigations. I really do. I think if AI can search databases, which it can now, and find certain things, who's to say it can't make those connections and jumps and things that we haven't thought of yet, whether we're not advanced enough yet or whether people just haven't had the time to do it yet. But I think that's the whole next step in everything, is allowing AI to read a room in things we can't measure.
Right.
I can't use, let me make layman's example, I can't use echolocation, but it's been proven that other things can.
Mm-hmm.
I can't fly, but it's proven other things can. That design is somewhere, and if AI can, manipulate or read DNA and things like that, and interpret that information better than what we can, it might move us to a new path to where we need to be at to measure these things, wherever it might be. We don't know what we don't know. That's but it's a lazy answer. You know what I mean? When we have things that can interpret massive amounts of data in seconds, more than what we can, I think that's where we need to go. We need to leave it there, and utilize that, because I would love if it scanned a room and realize, different color wavelengths and frequencies. Radio waves are all around you, but we can't see any, but that thing can. If we can't interpret that, but that can, that's where I think we're going to be moving next as, I guess as a paranormal community, what we need to, do to move to the next step and gain even more data.
In your experience, what's the ratio of investigations that you've been part of, or at least are privy enough to, that where something's been debunked rather than something's been validated? And the follow-up to that, I think, is obvious. The ones that are validated, what's the best, most interesting, most extreme result that you can talk about?
Okay, so if I had to put a percentage on it, like you were mentioning, I would say about 75% of the time there isn't a big event. We get a little something every time we go because of where we're at. We're not investigating a place that doesn't have any reports. That's a waste of time. So whenever we go somewhere, we can usually debunk with the proper tools. I've been feeling weary. I have this weird feeling. We all know EMF meters, though. There's scientific proof. There's studies that have that there. And we live in an area that is rather old. This area is rather old. So some of the infrastructure might still have equipment in it that would give off a ton of EMF readings. So people are telling us, well, I feel, this is how I feel. And who are we to tell people how they feel? But we can tell you that this causes this. Am I saying that's it? No. But is it proven that has done that? Yes. You know what I mean? Not every high EMF has been somebody's, or has debunked somebody's story. And places with no EMF doesn't mean, and somebody feeling weird doesn't mean that they're all paranormal either. So I would say 75% of the time we don't have something, no slam dunk. We really don't. We've had spikes over here where we, on the K2 meter where there is no electrical outlet, nobody has a cell phone nearby, nothing happens, there's no light on. We don't, we can put that in a report, but that's not the slam dunk thing, as I mentioned before, with an apparition that comes and I can't explain that. Many people can. Many people can just straight up call me a liar. And, there has been people that have lied about it, so we have to eat that. We have to eat if people just straight up don't believe it. But the the 25% that I'll focus on now, the 25%, there is no medium evidence. It's a few spikes here or there. It's an apparition. That's what real life investigation is. I'm not saying you're going to get an apparition every time, but when you get something, you get something. Mm-hmm. You know, it's the voice phenomenon that's on 2 out of 6 people's things, and we classify that as paranormal. I want to mention that we don't classify orbs at all. Orbs may or may not, but if we don't count every single one, if we don't count any of them, we can't give somebody a fake evidence, or not fake, but a phony explanation of what something was. So we just keep them all out. You know, orbs can be so many different things. So if we just limit them, nobody can be upset about that. But what, you know, would be great is, or what is great, the greatest one that I've been a part of has been an apparition of somebody getting pretty shaken up for, like pretty scared. And now these are, I won't say professionals, but these are people who have done it. So they've seen, you know, I guess been around the block, you know what I mean? They've seen a few things. Mm-hmm. So when somebody in a paranormal investigation who is a veteran gets shook up, it was probably pretty scary. You know, it probably was. So this gentleman, this is going back to Laurel Hill Cemetery, but we were in the house that they have there. They have a house that's now like their main office, a little gift shop, things like that. But upstairs used to be quarters, and this used to be a house that people lived in. You know, the groundskeeper would live in and take care of. So he was upstairs, and he was in one of the bedrooms, and I was in the loft area, so like at the top of the stairs, not really anywhere. And I thought I, you know, saw something out of the corner of my eye down the hallway. He was in one of the rooms that, you know, one of the bedrooms that had a closet, and he was just looking around in there with the K2, seeing if he could find anything. And I heard like a yell, you know, a scream almost, you know, like, you know, and I went over there and looked at him, and he said, he had a white look. He was like, who is that? And I said, what do you mean? It's just me. It's just us up here. And he said, you weren't playing a trick on me? I said, no, I haven't. I was at the top of the landing. I wasn't even, you know, within 10 steps of you, you know. He was saying he thought it was me in the doorway because it was a little off kilter. He's looking this way. The door is more to the side, not behind, but like the side there. He was leaning in, and he was looking on the K2 down, and he felt somebody like walk in. He thought it was me and just stand there. And he said in his vision, so think of just your vision, you know, that you're looking down in a closet floor, mm-hmm. and he's using K2. He said when he got to he went left to right. When I got to the right, there was somebody like this staring up at him, like leaning over and looking up at him from his right. And he dropped, and, you know, when he dropped it and went back, it wasn't there anymore. He said, I swear it was there. It was physical. I saw it. I couldn't see through it. And we immediately got our EV, you know, our digital voice recorder. We got that out. We tried something. He saw something. Let's try to get something on camera on tape. And we didn't get anything there. However, what he described the head looking up was more, you know, a grizzled older guy, short, like a kept beard, you know, not wild bushy, all of that. And when we got a hold of somebody from Laurel Hill who asked about former caretakers, they had a whole historical like book basically. And when they went through, you know, he identified one of the older photos as who was looking at him, who was a former caretaker. And, you know, when you hear that stuff on TV, but when you have those pieces fit and you're actually there, it's phenomenal. But this guy was shaken up. You know, when you look at somebody gets startled, you know, say you have a near miss of a car crash or something like that, you pant, you get a little sweaty, your heart rate goes up, you do all that. I'm shocked. I'm looking right at this guy who's physically seeing all of that. So, you know, those are involuntary reactions that happen when you're in shock. You know, that will always stick with me. and all of the pieces around it. The historical one with the photo, his reaction, and what he saw, and that he was a veteran and was scared. So that's fun.
Well, when you find something like that, and I heard what you said earlier. I remember that it's if there's too much dark energy, it's a no-go. Yes. So there's not too much dark energy, but you're never sure. I mean that's just a belief. That's not. That's true. You can't objectively test that, and you actually, or someone actually sees something, and the other instruments pick up, other circumstantial evidence to back it up, or physical evidence to back it up, electronic, whatever the right word is. But that you thought it was more of a light spirit. You find out it was actually a caretaker from, 85 years ago, or whatever the case might be. Is there a follow-up? Do they turn it over to an exorcist, or do they just say, oh, it's good, he's a caretaker, we're glad to have his spirit around here, or is it just you provide the information, then you boogie on out?
So yeah, I think it's more of the latter. We definitely just. And
what song do you boogie to? No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, we do. we have a choreographed dance.
Great.
So
good.
But we we turn the evidence over. We're there to find information. Again, we don't charge anything. We just do it for the love. We turn over our own sample reports to everyone that we go to. And
so you're never going to be those meddling kids. You're not Scooby Dooing it. You're just finding and saying, "Yep, that's real. we'll see you later. There's no bill in the mail."
Yeah. No, that's basically where it is. I mean, obviously, if something, when we had, and I'll give you an example of an investigation that got shut down. Right. So we were supposed to investigate this house. There was a woman that lived there. She had an adult son and no husband, no one else. It was just them two. They said, we've had knocks on the wall that when it's just us in the house. Very I would label it pretty basic paranormal activity. No broken windows, no piled up furniture, nothing like that. This was knocks, it was things moved, it was voices, it was the staircase, that's a common one too, footsteps in the hallway, the staircase, that sort of thing. So we get there, we meet up outside, every house we go to, we have little pre-report, read about, just very basic details, how to get there, address in a little bit, because we don't want to give away everything beforehand. We want to come in there with an open mind. Right. So you get there, right from the get-go, it felt different. And I don't want to paint a picture of a house was dark and it was run down. No, it was a house that had lights. It looked like your basic neighborhood cul-de-sac, smaller version of that house. And, we talked to them and they're like, oh, we're so glad you're here, all of that. Our leader stopped us and he's like, can I talk to my team for a second? And she's like, oh yeah, absolutely. She went back to her porch. He's talking to us. We're freezing out there. This was obviously a December one that they're going to shut down. So we're out there, we're talking. He's like, we're not going to investigate this house. I'm sorry for bringing you guys out here. I'm seeing non-human spirits in there. The energy in there is very dark, and I don't want to put us through it. There will be other investigations for us, but I'm going to go break the news to her. And we were, wow, what happened? What do you see? He's like, I'll get into it later, but why don't you get out? He really wanted us to get out of there really quickly. So what he told us later was whatever was in that house was preparing for a fight. And we were, like how I told you, we had a non-denominational prayer, and we don't even have holy water. We don't have sage. We literally would be showing up to a gunfight with a knife. That's what it is. And we got out of there. Nobody took anything. He referred them to, we don't really work with them, but we know of them. So I wouldn't say a brother or sister organization, but there are some people over in Jersey who only want to investigate the negative energy. They feel that it's better for them. They find more things there by going in and layman's term, pissing everything off in there. You know what I mean? And that sort of thing. So when we have things that would get shut down or we're not going to investigate, we'll at least route you to the appropriate place instead of leaving you high and dry.
So, okay, so you can give them a referral to somebody who has a different set of protocols. That's fine. That's good. All right. Let's move from ghosts to the UFO stuff, because that's actually what I figure we spend our stuff on. But the ghost stuff, I mean, I feel like I'm talking, on the Ghost Hunter show, so I feel like I should delve into it. But I don't want to give the UFOs a short shrift.
No, absolutely no. Again, a passion, the same way that UFOs and the paranormal as growing up, and investing more time. Now that I have more time into MUFON and UFO and UAP, and in our community, our I don't know what you want to call it. Our 10-time Super Bowl was that hearing that happened over the summer, and hearing things that we knew all along said by people who hid it all along. Mm-hmm. That's fascinating. So that has kicked off a massive amount of interest in everything, where paranormal might still have that connotation with it, but as this is becoming more UFOs and UAPs, just by definition, are more or easily scientifically tracked than what a paranormal can be, because you can get into speeds, you can get into all kinds of actual measurables that these UAPs have. You can take a portion of the sky and see how quick something flew from this area to this area. And just by simple math, you realize that that's a lot faster than anything we have, on track. So, no, I enjoy the UFOs and the discussion about UFO, all from tech to the civilizations that might be visiting us, to the theory behind what they are, and, how much consciousness, human consciousness, plays a part in all of this as well.
Right. So what are, I guess, same question differently, like what's the ratio of investigations where you've debunked something, rather, where something seemed validated, and what are some of the best examples of things you've found? I mean, I don't really care about the debunked ones, obviously.
No, absolutely. So you generally, that percentage is even slimmer than the paranormal one that I gave, I'll be honest. We have a lot more devices that can take photos now than what we ever had before. But so that means we have a lot more content now than we ever had before being submitted to wherever, Facebook groups, Twitter groups, people's personal pages, and then you have MUFON sites and obviously the ARO, but nobody knows what gets put into there.
What is ARO? What's that stand for?
The Advanced Aeronautical Research Organization, or Aerial Anomaly Research Organization. Aerial Anomaly Research Organization, which was developed by the government to be the government's version, in layman's terms, the government's version of MUFON, where people can submit what they saw. And I'm sure on the back end, if I'm just thinking about it, they take that, again, weed out that 90% that we were talking about, and then probably contact and investigate the ones that are there. But
what department of the government is that under? Is it part of the Department of Defense? Is it part of Space Force? Air Force?
It's a new program. It's a new department. It's never been anywhere before.
Well, it might be a new agency or administration, but it's going to be under. It has to be under some department.
So I believe that would be under Homeland Security.
Okay, Homeland.
I believe, but don't quote me on that. I believe it's that.
Well, I'm going to, because Homeland Security means they take it seriously, or at least you would think so. I mean, if they put
we're watching this now, so we can just ask them.
Listen, if they put it under like Department of Agriculture, it means that they're sort of categorizing with cattle mutilations or whatever. And it's like, big deal. But they put it under Department of Homeland Security. You would at least think that those are precious resources.
They are. But they wanted to give this a real, I wouldn't say a real shot, but not so much a shot, but they wanted to give this as much power as many resources as they could to look into these things. Now, what their motive is, that's conjecture, that's hearsay. We have no idea what they're trying to do. Some have speculated they are just looking for recovered craft so they can reverse engineer and sell the technology to the highest bidder. Some are looking for more biological reasons of how, if there was a non-human entity that was recovered, how do they breathe? Where do they come from? What level of gravity? I mean, we don't even know that. If it's from a different planet, can they even survive walking on our gravity? We have no idea. That would be on whatever their planet is. But in terms of the investigations and things like that, there is a ton of resources that can help you. If you went outside right now, you saw something up in the sky, you yourself could be your own researcher. There's no more going out into the middle of like a park, having a telescope and big open sky. You see something outside that looks odd. How many flight tracker apps, how many flight tracker websites can you go look to see where the planes are? And then you can hop over to a helicopter one because, I think they might be categorized differently. But you can see everything that's in the sky in your area. And then you have something. If I see that light that's moving, it's not on here. By definition, that's an unidentified flying object or, aerial phenomenon, depending on, what you want to call it.
I think the apps
mean it's extraterrestrial?
I think the apps are different I think if it's line of sight flights, those that are under 5,000 feet, which pretty sure all helicopters are.
Yes.
Except for even the ones I think that go, I don't know, the mountains go higher than that, but those are very specialty. Anyway, so it's probably line of sight versus ones that are subject to air traffic control. That's probably how the tech works. But a little showing off there.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. So I actually, now you mention the ratio, it does make sense because, even when we're talking pre-production, Starlink is routinely sending up 6 or 12 satellites at a time, and they look like lights in a formation, either a straight line or in a V. Every now and then you might, if it's a particularly sunny day, you might see a plane and the sun is reflecting off its bottom, and it looks like a solid gold orb, because you don't see its running lights just because it's the daytime and you couldn't. Or the International Space Station, or a particularly big, or a satellite, or, and SpaceX is launching stuff pretty much every day. They're launching things. I think their schedule is like every day, every 3 days, they're launching something, and not just the ones that are covered on the news where they're testing new rockets. They explode. They're the number one satellite carrier in the world by far. So you could see a lot of things that in the sky that you probably couldn't see before and take photos of it. So let's talk about then some of the ones that you were able to validate, or at least not explain away, that seem like there's some validity to them, and which are the most interesting?
Okay, so obviously we can validate the ones that aren't on those flight tracker and things like that, that aren't Starlink, because I don't know if you've seen Starlink live. It does look weird. It looks incredibly odd. So taking those ones aside, I actually had a trip, and this isn't around where I am, but I went out to Las Vegas, and when I was out there, I took a trip to the Valley of the Orbs. And that's the perfect cross between the paranormal and somebody who's into UFOs, because there's lights out in the desert and people don't know what they are, where they come from, and they can't grab them. They can't go closer to them. So when I went out there, you want to talk about open sky? As far as you look that way and as far as you look that way, it is just beautiful sky. I would say triples the amount of things in the sky compared to here on the East Coast. And I'm not talking about light pollution. I'm not talking about any of that. They have so many things that are up there moving that you could spend every single night, if you had a house out there, with binoculars, with a telescope, and track these things. And they gave us these really high-powered laser pointers to use to help identify like what we're looking at, because they can go far enough that you can point in the sky to something, and they were explaining this one is a satellite because of this. This one is a plane because of that. And we're looking, and something went over the sky, and they kept us, here's Area 51's over this way, so pay attention over there. You know what I mean? Like that kind of stuff. But it wasn't a joke. In the sky, there was these craft that were moving, and I'm not a big airplane guy. I don't know that, how close, but I'm pretty sure they can't be that close to one another and fly safely. And these big lights that are out there are huge. The craft would have to be a football field long and be up in the sky, and it has its buddy, I would say, like the width of my finger if I had to put it out there, away from it.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't make any sense if you're anything I've ever learned about, air and space. So we're like, oh, what's that one? They're like, oh, yeah, that comes out every once in a while. And the people that were leading this tour were so nonchalant that it happens all the time. So me, I want to find out all the facts, so I guess I am a skeptic, even though I've been and saw a bunch of things. I asked some local people, that weren't on the tour, that weren't tourists, in my travels around there, and said, do you guys always have these kind of lights in the sky? They're like, maybe not always, but, at least a few times a week. I said, you guys don't think anything of it? It's a completely different culture out there. They don't question it. They're like, oh, well, it might be a UFO, might not. Because they've had so many. Let that happen. Let a field-size thing come out here on the East Coast where we never had it. You have panic. You have people calling, police, 911, all that kind of stuff. Out there, they're used to it. I think out of that whole story about these huge, I don't even know what to call them, craft, is more so the people's attitude towards them than them itself.
Mm-hmm.
You understand? It's a phenomenally wonderful thing. All of us are trying to get pictures. All of us are trying to, it is at night, and we have night vision, so we can, but your phone ain't going to see that. You know what I mean? But we're seeing these wonderful things. Lights. Somebody spent, whether it's ours or somebody else's, they spent a ton of resources, and for us, I guess it would be money to have something like this. But the night vision was so advanced that you could see individual lower lights on them, an outline, obviously it'd be a lighter color than what the black sky would be in the background, and make out shape. These things were flying, at an advanced speed. So when you bring in stories like the Phoenix Lights, underground tunnels, that is another thing that people talk about with these Air Force bases out in the West. If you have these things out and above, they're more likely to get photographed. And all of the stories that you have with Phoenix Lights, which is a wonderful story that they called it the was a U-2 spy plane. That's what their the official explanation was for it. When you take 5 seconds of looking at the video, you realize there's no way that that's what it is.
Well, I think it was the B-2 stealth fight. Stealth bomber is what it probably ended up being.
Yeah. So, the B-2 has been another, which is an odd-looking craft of ours. You know what I mean? That is an odd-looking...
It's a giant black triangle. It's designed not to be detected, but it probably had to have running lights on for its test because it's wasn't at 65,000 feet or whatever altitude it drops its bombs from or its smart bombs from. So I'm pretty sure that the Phoenix Lights were, a B-2 stealth or some prototype of that, just because of the triangle of the lights on one, just the configuration. I'm never sure why an extraterrestrial craft would have outside lights. We have outside lights to help with seeing and to help the vehicles don't crash into each other. Same reason radio antennas have lights on them, and the top of buildings have lights on them, and so it's to avoid accidents. That's what it's for. I would imagine if they managed to go through interstellar or interdimensional, that they don't need those kinds of exterior ways of being able to see. They figured out other ways to see, whether, through spectrometry or other ways. I'm not sure if I just made that word up. Now,
I'll coast.
Yeah, but I have one asterisk on this, and it's funny because I was listening to another podcast on paranormal, and they made a comment like, when all these things are crashing, they're like, these aren't just kids driving Chevy Novas, And I thought, because I'm naturally a contrarian, I thought to myself, well, who says? And then I thought to myself, wait a minute, who says? Maybe these are the tricycles, and these are the Chevy Novas, and this is where the adolescent version of the aliens or extra-dimensional beings come, and they do crash their cars, they learn how to do it, they have fun. This is their demolition derby. This is where they take their junk tech, and it is their Chevy Novas, and when they go back home, their parents are driving, the new E500 Mercedes version of their tech back home, wherever it is. So who says these aren't their Chevy Novas?
Yeah, I mean, or that they're the drunk teenagers of the universe.
Right.
But you made an interesting point about the exterior lights, and my, I guess, response to that would be, we might be adopting how we use lights on theirs. It might not be a light at all. Mm-hmm. It might just be a byproduct of whatever is going on in their engine. Mm. You know what I mean? In layman's terms, that produces this light as its waste compared to...
It's an energy signature of some sort.
Yes. So, I mean, and that's all speculation, sure. But it might not be, we might try to fit our, square peg in that round hole model by saying, why would they have lights and things like that? And I agree with you. If you can travel interdimensionally or through, space and time and what have you, and then you crash here, that does, on the surface, seem pretty unlikely. However, if you're going, I'm not going to say that, but if you're going through a rough patch in a city, are you taking your Rolls Royce or are you taking your Ford Taurus? Mm-hmm. And maybe we are that because, let's be honest, our first idea is to shoot at the thing.
Right. Yep. Okay, so maybe they're using more of their junk to see what we got to test out. Or, there's always the old theory, these things fly beautifully in space, but, something went wrong. Why are we making them all powerful gods? They just might be 300 years ahead of us technology-wise. And maybe something went wrong and it wasn't supposed to be in an atmosphere. It wasn't built to be in an atmosphere, or it wasn't built to withstand our gravity well. Whatever the case. So there's tons of, rank speculation. And that's a perfect segue to, as we wind down, I don't like to really go past 90 minutes if I can help it, into some rank speculation from you. What do you think these things are? Do you think that they are related to some race or races that have been here before, that have engaged in panspermia or sort of, plotting? Or do you think they're science expeditions, or do you think that they are their version of kids or goobers fooling around? Do you think they're extraterrestrial or extra-dimensional? Or is it just, we just don't have enough information and all of that stuff is, all of it's in play or all of it's nonsense. But what has your experience with witnesses and your investigations and other investigators and talking to people in all the many, many MUFON chapters around the world, what is your punditry on this?
Well, so my theory, and I'll give you one, I'm not going to skirt around anything. I'll tell you exactly what I believe. To me, I believe that these beings are not necessarily from another planet. I do subscribe to the interdimensional theory. What I mean by that is, I don't even believe at some points they are actually here. I believe the veil is thinned between our reality and their reality, and we can look through at certain points. I don't necessarily believe, if the Phoenix lights were extraterrestrial, that they were hanging out over Phoenix. I believe those lights in the sky were hanging out over where they believed they were, and the veil got thin enough to allow us to see through that portal into there. I don't even know if they actually come here, or I'm not sure if they actually even come here to visit Earth, or do they get trapped in one of these wormholes, veil thinnings, something like that? And that's why they crash, because they're, like how you said with their planet, it might be for their dimension, it works perfectly. But really, they're not flying light years away. They're really just taking a trip in their place and end up in ours through some...
And who knows what the physics are in another dimension?
That's exactly right. We can only talk about what's here in our space and time, in our dimension, right?
Mm-hmm.
You get into the Hadron Collider and certain discoveries that are now not discoveries of alternate dimensions. You know, if I were to do a real quick lesson on it, essentially at the highest dimension is your reality, and everything else is more shadows of what that is. And if we were to use that, a plane is a pretty good imitation of what a UFO would be. And that UFO is probably an imitation of whatever's next. I can't say that for sure. Maybe that UFO one is the final one and we're second, right? Or maybe we're at the bottom of the barrel. But the way we can do it is we know what 1D is, right? We know what 2D is, and we live in 3D.
Mm-hmm.
Three-dimensional objects can cast images on other surface, on the 2 dimensions below it. Who's to say that's not being cast onto ours?
Right. It could also be like an interposed sort of reflection that, you know.
Very good,
yeah. George Mitrovic, who's been on the show, he actually introduced me to that concept, and and there are quantum physicists who do posit theories like that. So, it was bad enough for me when it was like in superhero realms. I hate the multiverse, and the fact that science validates that it's theoretically possible, if not probable. I'm not sure where they are on the spectrum with that. My brain shuts down. I don't even want to hear about any of it, but it seems like I'm going to have to. But thank you for your time. And where can people? Yeah, of course. Where can people find Tom Cahue if they want to? If you want to be followed and supported, how do they follow and support you?
Absolutely. So you can follow me on Twitter at Tom Cahue, one word, Cahue. And please check out our Paranormal Society. I'm sure we have, or I'm not sure, I know we have a ton of evidence, and I'm sure we would love to have you visit our site, Free Spirit, FSPI, Free Spirit Paranormal Investigators. The website's www.fspi.com. Check us out there. And also, if you want to join a weekly discussion, 1 hour, not too much time, we are on the Meetup app, and we have a virtual call every week on Meetup called UFOs Over PA. So please search for UFOs Over PA. I co-lead that group with another individual, and we could cut it up. We chop it up. Some weeks I take if there's a specific very good event that happened on MUFON's recording, I'll take that image or video, play it for everybody, and we discuss it. If not, then we just have generic topics about I read this from this individual or that individual. So if you just want to join in on the conversation, talk about what interests you, and here's some great UFO talk, UFOs Over PA on Meetup.
All right, excellent. Well, thank you, Tom. And folks, definitely check out the website, and you can join the group if you like, and if you're interested. And if you think it's too far for your area, there's definitely a MUFON chapter near you. And they have conferences and things like that. One of our prior guests from Brazil was recently in Ohio at I guess an international conference for MUFON. So anyway, that's all great. Thanks again for being on the show. And folks, please, first of all, I thank you for listening to the show, and subscribe, give a nice review and a rating if you have an opportunity, and share it with your friends. Referrals are the best source of show growth. Once again, I thank our guest, Tom Cahue, and you'll all see us again, or you'll hear from us again next week in the Garden, your one-stop mystery school and university in your ears.